Welcome to Peak, Train Like a Girl, a podcast by girls in sport, for girls and coaches in sport. We're here to amplify your voice. We think it deserves to be heard. At Peak, we're a safe place for girls to hang out, learn, grow, and build community. And boy, do we have a special guest for you today. But before we get introduced to our special guest, Danielle, I have to ask you about hydration in summer. Have you tried, one of our sponsors is N2 Mineral Hydration. Are you a fan? Tell me, are you soaking in all the goodness of N2?
I'm more than a fan. I am over the moon obsessed. I've started to put it in my smoothies, my daughter's smoothies. I bring it out for parties, have it for everyone. I literally am obsessed with the fact that it tastes really, really good, not chemically at all. And it seems to do a really good job to refuel me as a runner, but also helps me get really good sleep.
You know what? I'm the same. And now listen, they are definitely a sponsor of the podcast for sure. But this is not like, I'm not promoting this because they're a sponsor of the podcast. I'm promoting it because it is one of the best tasting hydration tools I've ever had. And the thing that I'm obsessed about is it stays mixed the whole time. Is that crazy to you?
That is so true. That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. You just said it. Yes.
Oh yeah, it's a game changer. Yeah, I look forward when I get home. We're deep in the midst of camp right now. So when I get home from camp, and I can't wait to talk to our guests about how to run maybe a more organized summer camp. But I'm ready for a little break, and N2 is just what I need to get myself back in the game for my next set of clients to come in. So if you have not tried N2 yet, we definitely have a code that you can use, and we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. But I just had to get Danielle's feedback on that. It is amazing. We think you'll love it. I also have to tell you this funny story. I'm going to keep the details super obscure so as not to get anybody in trouble. But I have an athlete that works at a ice cream situation. We're just going to keep it there. And the ice cream situation makes those slushy things. And so she actually brings her N2 to work, and she self-makes herself a slushy creation with N2.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think you should start selling it. She's like, I can't, Samson, I'll get in trouble.
Yes, it's a great idea.
So I thought that was so funny. So yeah, it's all the rave where I coach too. So without any further ado, Danielle, should I get our next guest introduced before we get her warmed up?
I think we must.
I think we must too. So one of the reasons I'm so glad that Danielle and Center for Creative Growth joined our team is that she gets to introduce me to amazing people doing good work and having done amazing work in the world of girls in sport. And this next guest, Ms. Jody Gitelis, is somebody I have sat back, watched, admired, learned from for a very long time. And one of the things which is very funny, that I love best about her is that I wear head protection all the time. I've always got a visor on or a bucket hat, and I never see any other coach like that. But I was like, wait, when I first saw her, when I was coaching from afar, I'm like, look, there's another coach that wears head protection like I do. So, that was the thing besides her being a winning coach. So a few of her accolades. She coached at Barrington High School, which is in the state of Illinois, for 36 years. She had 92 conference championships, 121 sectional championships, 9 individual state championships, 15 sectional titles, and she took the state title in 2008, or the second place in the state, 2008, 2015, and the state title in 2007. And if that does not just rock anybody's world and make them be like, I need to sit down and listen to all the pearls of wisdom this incredible coach has to say, I don't know what else we can do to capture your attention. So Jody, are you ready to get warmed up?
I am so ready, but first let me thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, you are so welcome. All right. Iced or hot coffee?
Hot coffee.
Me too. Track workout or long run?
track workout.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Muffin or donut?
Oh, donut.
All right, do you have a specific flavor?
Definitely. I love the cronuts with just a glaze or the thick, doughy, glazed donut.
Yeah,
The yeast
I love it.
donuts I like.
Yeah, me too. And it's so fun. That's exactly what I am. And I try to explain that to people, like that there's a difference and nobody really kind of gets that. I
I get
often
it.
say, yeah, see? And I often say one of the reasons I coach is that you always get a free donut, right? Like you go to an invite and there's always a free donut and a cup of coffee waiting for you.
Exactly.
All right. One last question. Beach or mountains?
Oh,
I should give
I
you desert. We should say beach, mountains, or desert.
Well, desert is not a great connotation, but I love looking at the mountains. But I do love the sound of the beach and the waves hitting the sand, and so I'm going to say beach.
All right. I love that. Well, thank you for getting warmed up with us. And we start every episode the same. We just ask, what is your story and your connection to being a girl in sport? You can start as early in your career as an athlete or a coach as you'd like, or you can start 5 years ago. It doesn't really matter.
Well, I think I have to start early because I graduated with a physical education degree, and at my first job, they said, you'll be coaching health. And then I was assigned to the girls. They were separated, the girls and the boys, and I taught the sex education classes for health. And then they said, and you'll have the Orchesis dance team, and those were my two areas that I graduated in. And they said, oh, and also you'll be coaching track and field as an assistant. And then it's been 48 years or 49 years since then, and I have never stopped coaching track and field except for maybe about 3 years in between, a year here and there. So that's my background. I was never a high school athlete because I'm older. They didn't have high school athletes. I think we had a girls gymnastics club. I think we had a badminton team and a tennis team. So if you were a person that liked sports in high school, you were in leaders gym or a cheerleader, and that was it. So my start learning about sports and girls in sports was a long time ago at my first job at East Leiden High School.
And where is that? Where was that high school?
That's in Franklin Park, Illinois.
Oh, okay. And then from there you went to Barrington High School?
From there, I left there after 3 years and moved to Florida for my husband's residency, which he hated. And we moved back to Chicago, so he got into a different residency. And I worked for Kraft Foods for a year, and I applied every which way but loose. Every day my bosses were out of town, I applied and got a job at Glenbrook South High School, and I stayed there as their head coach, and that's a nice story. Filling shoes that were so big, I just faked it till I made it, and left in 1981 to have my first child, and missed track and field so much that I went back to Leiden as an assistant coach for a number of years, and I heard about the Barrington job in a bathroom, and I went and applied for that. I waited 2 years because they were all talking about all leaving, and I waited and then applied for the Barrington job because I was actually going to move to Barrington. So it all worked out really well, and I was offered the head position right away, and I said, no, I'm not going to be teaching. I'm just going to be coaching, so I can't take the head. I'll take the assistant. Well, the AD was very adamant about me being the head and basically said to me, you're going to be doing all the work anyway. You might as well be the head coach. And I said, but I'm not in school. How am I going to recruit? How am I going to do this? He said, okay, listen. He said, basically, if you don't take the head job and you come in, you're an assistant, and you're doing all the work anyway. He says, I have a deal. You can always step down, but once I give it to somebody else, you can't step up. And so it took me 2 weeks to make this decision because I wanted to be there for the kids and do the best I could, and I didn't feel it was possible. But I took the job under the understanding that I could step down, and I was the head coach for 36 years at Barrington High School. So it obviously worked out quite well for me.
It certainly did. I love that you talk about recruiting within the high school. I think that the times have changed so much, and I do want to get into that at some point. I've started coaching at Libertyville High School about 17 years ago, so not quite as long, but I was the same way. When I was growing up, I didn't do track and field or cross country because those things weren't available. It was cheerleading and tennis, and I think field hockey was there, but there just wasn't the same opportunities. And so it was kind of the same as you. I learned by doing, and learned by listening and learned by experimenting. And I think that's one of the things that we might have almost lost some of the art of with coaching. Right now, I think there's so much information out there. I think not only are coaches bombarded with information, I think athletes are bombarded by information. And I'm just curious, how did you navigate your career, the span of, 4 decades of coaching through those types of transitions? How were you able, because one of the things you were quoted as saying is, it's a process. On Tuesday meets, I try hard to see what's out there, who's progressing, what parts of the puzzle can I put together, and then you make decisions, obviously, for the invitation or for the invitational over the weekend, so the bigger stake meets. So how did the idea of that process, how did that change over your decades of coaching? And what do you think the current state of coaching, do you think it is as good as it was when you first started? Has it changed? Is it not a comparison thing? Kind of fill us in there.
Oh boy, that's a lot of questions in one sentence there, Anne Marie. Okay, it's okay. Well, when I started, it was learned by doing. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had one coach that, when I was hired at Glenbrook South, they asked me if I could get along with people that are kind of maybe not the happiest person around. And I said, well, if we have a problem, we can discuss it, right? And I remember him saying to me, what are you trying to do? Build a Girl Scout club? I'm like, well, I'm trying to get as many numbers as we can because these kids are going to develop. I mean, that was just something innate for me, right? So yes, we built up to about 80 kids one year at Glenbrook South, and that was a lot for him. But these little kids, he was the distance coach, and these little kids developed. And I think in the end, after about 2 years, he was in my corner big time and very supportive. So that worked. But again, it was a process, and I was learning. I would say that my hurdle athlete that year taught me more than I taught her, unfortunately. But she taught me a lot because she was so good and her technique was so good. I learned from that and then kept learning and going on and on and on. So as far as how things changed, oh boy, I was one of the first female coaches in a man's world. And that in itself was very challenging because I was a strong female, not just somebody that came in. I had very strong convictions about what I wanted and what I thought, and it didn't always work out for me. But I found that if I went and approached the gentlemen, many of them that were in the ADs or other coaches around, and if I would take a deep breath and go in and go, do you think you could help me? If I used that approach, I got my way with whatever I needed. So that's what I did way back in the beginning. and whatever it was, it worked. but as we moved on through time, there were more head coaches or more just female coaches coaching girls. In the beginning at Glenbrook South, I only hired a girl staff for many years and as long as I could till it wasn't right for the kids because I needed more than a warm body in the throes. And so I ended up, that was my first male hire. But it was kind of fun being an all-girl coaching staff for a while. And I just hired people that I knew we could get along with, and they could be girly and have to wear the same clothes and match. And and the men that coached with us got joked about by the other male coaches. Oh, she's got you wearing the same clothes as the other coaches. And it's interesting how that manifested because all the other schools started doing that. The male coaches were dressing alike. When that happened, I said, okay, I'm here. I made it, right? Just very interesting. But I think, we're spanning 4 decades. I'm trying to be as quick and easy as I can with all of this. I think basically that the kids changed and the parents changed over the years with having so many other opportunities, the club opportunities and working out. So they weren't just yours anymore. And parents were starting to get involved, and the more talented the athlete became, the smarter the parents became, and that wasn't necessarily the case. That they did become smarter, but they wanted to have more control, and that was a problem, and that was an adjustment, and that's what I would say. Besides all the stuff that's online, and the kids knowing exactly where they are. I mean, I think there's a positive aspect to some of that, and certainly so much fun to see the development once we got the fully automatic timing. And yeah, I mean, I used to have kids that they would be second in a race and they would be missed and they give them fifth and there was no proof and you weren't allowed to bring out your phone to prove it. I mean, so a lot has happened over the years that's very, very positive. And it's exciting. It's still exciting to me.
Yeah, that was actually, you nailed every single question and you hit things exactly where I feel like they need to be hit. I love that you talked about being the lone woman in your position at a big high school and how you almost had to change who you were to show up for the male leadership. I think that's important to talk about because I sometimes think people don't either appreciate that or they're not honest about it. There's still not a lot of female head coaches in the school that I am at. They are less representative, particularly in female sports. There's more male head coaches in female sports than there are female head coaches. And I think a lot of that is kind of what you're saying. It is a male dominated administration. And I think that sometimes women want to show up as who they are and they don't take that softer approach that you talked about. But I also believe that girls need to see women in positions of power because so they know that they can also do that. I think that is super important. I love that you talked about hiring an all-female staff and the joy that gave you. We were an all-female staff when I was brought on to the coaching staff that I was on. And it was some of the best years of my life. We also, because it just wasn't serving the population anymore, are no longer an all-female staff for a bunch of different reasons. But I think that's important to see too, that we can all get along and I think that's the other, one of the things that women don't get along with each other. Well, women do, as you have shown and I have shown, women do. And they're some of my closest friends to this day. I think it's important to talk about that kids have changed and that parents have changed. I think it's a really interesting perspective that you have. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. That is, the more talented the athlete becomes, the more involved the parent becomes. And there is some conflict there, right? Because there's almost, even if you just scrape it down to the athlete, it's almost like there's too many voices in that athlete's head. And, what you talk about process a lot, that it's a process. And I'm guessing that your coaching style is that your athletes commit to your process. And I'm wondering what happens when an athlete decides that the process you had wasn't what their caretakers, their parents, their other trainers had in mind for them. How did you navigate some of that?
Well, very diplomatically, because obviously parents want the best for their children, but so do their coaches. And I think once they realize that we can all be on board and all want the same things, and maybe we just have a different way of going about it. So sometimes you can't. Sometimes they're very strident in what they want. And if you're in a win-win situation, great. But if you're in a lose situation, then sometimes you just give in and let that play out. I want to go back a little bit about women head coaches and why it was so hard, because it's still not as, it's different now than it was before, because women are now know that they can work and have kids and still be in the workforce. I was very fortunate to have a husband who was very pro me and allowed me to have my kids, raise my kids, and have help so I could, when they got home, have somebody to drive them around to their activities while I was coaching, because it was important to me and it was important to him that I had that. So that little part, a funny story. I just gave birth to my son, and that was 1994, and Ola Bundy was still the head of girls track and field at the Illinois state level, and I was bringing a 2-week-old child down to the state meet, and I wanted to park in the back parking lot of the state meet, and that's where all the press was and whatever, but it was never filled. So I called and I asked her if I could have a parking pass so I could go and nurse my baby, or if it was raining, my baby would be with the babysitter in the car and in the air conditioning, whatever it was, whatever. So at first she says, oh no, I can't do that. And here I am, just had this baby. My emotions are still high and whatever. And I'm like holding and biting my tongue. And I said, I am one of your very few head coaches. I said, I had a baby. You have to help me here and make this happen for me. So you get other female coaches coaching your females. So, it clicked, and I was very distraught. I got off the phone with her and I cried because I was all those emotions after you have a baby. But anyway, she said to me, okay, wait, you're right. Okay, you're going to get your pass. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Because what was I going to do with my 2-week-old child at the state meet if I didn't have him right near me, I had to nurse him, for crying out loud. So that's a funny story, but it did work out well. And she was a big proponent for women and women's sports. And as some people did not appreciate her, but then we got all the men in there and it was totally different. So, and some of them were great and some of them just not so great too. But I always have a soft spot in my heart for Ola Bundy. And those of people who have been around for a long, long time will know that name, because she was a big proponent of women's sports. So shout out to her.
Yeah, that is amazing. That if you could see the smile on my face, not because you had to go through that, but because you did go through that. And you did that so I could be here. You did that for the next generation. And I think there's really something to be said to celebrate those that came before us, because the roads they paved were harder. They were fought. I mean, you fought for what was right, and you fought for that equity piece, right? Where I want to be there. I worked hard to be here. My athletes worked hard to be here, and there needs to be some accommodations there. So the fact that you were willing to do that gave the next person that asked the easier road. They had the easier because of people like you. And that is why we're here. We're here to not just celebrate extraordinary humans like you, but we need to remember those stories, because those are important stories. We never want to go back there. We want to make sure that we are constantly moving forward. Sometimes we have to pause, right? But we need to make sure that we remember those so we don't ever go back to that place. I do have a couple more questions that I want to ask, but I know, Danielle, like you were so lucky to have been coached by this extraordinary human. So before I kind of like monopolize what could be the next 3 weeks, I know none of us have that kind of time, I want you to kind of join in here, like, and then just save me some time at the end, because I have a couple other things I want to sift through, but I want you to have the opportunity to be able to have a conversation with a coach who had such significant impact in your life.
Yeah, and I'm in delight right now because I know Jody as a coach. I know her as a dear friend. I know a lot about Jody, so I am relishing, Anne-Marie, you unravel, Jody's history and her rich wisdom, because I want the world to know about Jody. I want more women in sport, coaches in sport, women coaches to hear the story. I want male coaches to hear her story so that we can all be better educated and have more gratitude for the process of what has gone on over these decades. I will highlight something you both have already talked about, which as an athlete of Jody, it really resonates with me that not only is Jody, to me, not scared to be a trendsetter, she's not scared of creating culture shock. She sets the tone, she sets the bar for others to actually question it and realize there's other ways, there's better ways, and that she has opened the door and the opportunity for other teams to start doing some nuanced practices, whether it be the mindfulness training, whether it be positive visualization. But when we go back just to the women coaches in sport, the nursing story, Jody, for me, like empowers me as a woman who's also a mom, but also angers me, but also, again, really puts me back as a high schooler watching the team that you created of coaches. I remember, Anne-Marie, dozens and dozens of times our jumps coach would bring her newborn like in a carrier, like young toddler in a carrier. Those are my first memories of seeing a female coach in sport, because Jody, at that time, your kids were out of, carriers, and bringing them to practice. And that to me wasn't odd. That was what I was used to. I was like, oh yeah, if you're a female coach who has a baby, you bring him to practice. How else is this going to work? Duh. And so the fact, Jody, when you tell that story about your son being 2 weeks old and you getting the pushback, I took it obviously for granted that that was just the norm. And now I'm even more, I would say, inspired by the fact that you've created this pathway for so many female athletes to see that as the norm, such as one of my very best friends, Molly Glantz, who was a teammate of mine under Jody, who now is also a coach at Barrington, who brings her young kids, newborns, to practice every so often. And so it's not a taboo. It's not a failure. It's not a weakness. It's not, oh, look at that, it's less than. It's like, this is how it's going to work if we're going to work with it. And I love that you set the bar.
I just want to say that Danielle and I are extremely close. She has always been my daughter from another mother, even as an athlete. And to this day, I still feel like she's mine. So I just wanted to get that out there. I have not talked about what you just touched on. I have not talked about how I started using relaxation and visualization, how that just came about. And I really so strongly believe in all of that and positive mindset. I started because I was in a yoga class and the music was playing and it was relaxation and I was going in and out and in and out. And I thought, oh, how could I do that? So I researched how to relax the body, and then I made up my own way about visualization because there really wasn't a lot at the time. And I think right now that's really what I want to touch on, if that's okay with you guys, because I think that my success as a coach is empowering athletes with the visualization and what your body can do and what your mind can do and how powerful their minds are. And is that okay? Do I have a few minutes to do that or no?
You absolutely
I
do,
would
but
like
I have to pause you for just a minute because this is there's so many things right here. I may need to take the rest of the day off of work to like process all this, but I don't even know if you know this. I don't know if you're going to remember this, but there was an article written by the Chicago Tribune. It was probably 16 or 17 years ago. And the article was about yoga and breath work and athletes, cross country and track athletes. It was specific to that. But I was brought into Libertyville High School when I was brought in 17 years ago. I was brought in by the head coach because I'm a certified yoga instructor and a certified breath coach, and they wanted to bring this into their athletes. So the Chicago Tribune had written an article and they highlighted Barrington High School and Libertyville High School and the work they were doing with yoga and meditation.
I have chills.
That's great.
Is that crazy? I'm going to try to dig the article up. I'm going to try to find it. So they talked about these two programs doing this weird thing called like yoga or something. Like it's very interesting. So yes, please talk away is the point.
Yeah, and the other thing I have to say through all this, and Debbie Revolta, who is now the head coach, she's been the head coach of cross country, but is now the head coach of track as well. You know, I coached her senior year in high school. That's when we met. We were 9 years difference. She's my best friend and a fabulous, fabulous coach. And I know she's going to be in a podcast in next month. So that's fabulous. But I do have to go over some of the stuff because I think it's really important. The yoga started me because I couldn't believe that the music stopped. Well, the music didn't stop. I fell asleep. And then I woke up again. It was the most relaxing thing I'd ever experienced in my life. So that's how I started. But from there, the visualization, when I read about that, and there's a book that I'd like to highlight because there's a few, but The Power of Your Subconscious Mind is really, really a wonderful book. It's an old book, but if you can find it, it gives lots of things. The Secret is the book, not the video. The video is kind of hokey, but The Secret also gives you lots of good things. Then the best one also is The Secret Behind the Secret, which tells you to bring in not just the secret and try and manifest, all these good things, but how you feel when you're doing it, how you feel when you're going and performing, is there a smile on your face, the warmth and funny feelings about reaching your goals. All of that is so important with your visualization. So those 3 books I'd like to highlight. The Secret, you have to do the work. You can't just manifest it. You have to do the work. But it's a start, is what I'm saying. And the other things that by doing all this is trying to change the mindset of athletes to be only positive and to learn how to set positive goals. So I once read and heard about that the universe does not recognize the word not. So, or don't, or whatever. So if you're a lifeguard and you say to your kids, don't run, what are they hearing last? Because if they're not recognizing don't, they're hearing run. So maybe a better thing to say would be please walk, right? Instead of don't run, because it's the last word that they hear. Well, there's negative quotes that are the same, and they're meant to be positive, but when you say never quit, what's the last word that you have in your head? So, for a long time, kids would come and say, oh, I found this quote, coach. And I went, yeah, it's not going to work for me, because it's a positive, but it's a negative positive. So you're not being as empowered as you can be if it was all positive, because there's still the negative element. So it's very important, because the other thing that I was taught, that your thoughts have energy. And so if you're thinking positive things without any negative things and they have energy, I'm in trouble if I'm having negative thoughts and not saying things properly. So writing them down gives them more power, but saying them out loud makes them even more powerful. So, I would have the kids make up a mantra or something that they would say to themselves when they were running. Because, being the sprint and hurdle coach, everybody was mine. So most of the stuff was basically for those kids running an 800 mile and 2 mile, because there's time to think. So there's time to have those negative thoughts. Well, what are you going to do? You got to get rid of them as fast as you can and replace them with a positive thought. So I would say, come up with something that is positive for you. I am strong. I am smooth. I am fast. Or even just strong, smooth, and fast. So I have another cute story, because Deb and another athlete, her name, we called her Ski. I wasn't a runner. They decided in high school that they were going to take me on runs. I'm like, okay, you guys, let's do it, So here we are. We started with a mile and we ran this Crestwood run, and I would say to myself, I feel good. I feel good. I feel good. And as I was saying it, I added cha-cha-cha. I feel good, cha-cha-cha. I was a dancer, right? That was my area of expertise with the Orchesis Dance Club. So, I made up this thing, and Debbie was like, Coach, we're going faster now. So that's how that started for me, to tell the kids, you need to have this thing in your head that you can, when you're not feeling great, what are you going to say to yourself so you only feel great? So those little things are what I started with, what I ended up with, and now I have a whole situation of what I say to kids and how I ask them and how I talk to them and walk them through, how to empower themselves. Just this last season with a Barrington athlete, she was having trouble deciding she didn't like cross country anymore, and she was now going to be this 400, 800 runner. And, I had to talk her. I said to her, you started as a 2 miler. What's all this stuff about? You don't like the 3 miles anymore? That's crazy. So I said, we got through it all. She told me a bunch of stuff. I turned the pages on her, and she just looked at me and she said, wow. And I said, wow. Yeah, wow. Go out and do it. Wow. So, it's experience. It's knowing what I know and how I can motivate kids. It's been so empowering for me as a person. I wish I could have more athletes. So I don't know if you know, Anne Marie, but I am coaching here in Vegas now at a high school, and I have boys and girls, because that's how they do it in Nevada. They don't have girls coaching girls and whatever. You coach boys and girls here. So I'm not a head coach. I'm just the hurdle coach, and I don't mean to say just, but it'll be a work in progress. But I am helping the distance coaches with their mind, because it's not something they do at the school or haven't done, but they will now. So that's my story.
Yeah. I will say, Jody, that was 20 years ago that you first, 24 years ago, that you first introduced the power of the mind to me as a person beyond an athlete. And to this day, when I'm running and I'm having a tough run, I still will repeat on command, strong, smooth, fast. You're strong, you're smooth, you're fast. And I will let it go to my cadence. And, Anne-Marie, I can't remember when I spoke about it, whether it was on last year's podcast when you had me as a guest or someone else's podcast, that when I was a part of Jody's 2007 state winning team, I do believe the reason why we won, we had a lot of hard workers, a lot of good connection, a lot of good talent. We had it all going on. But I do believe we had the mental edge over everyone on the field. And a lot of us were seeing the mental performance coach that Jody had recommended us to go seek as extra practice, to really amplify what she was doing in practices, from those 3.5 hours we'd meet with her. And I do think that not only helped us win that state title, I think it transformed all of our lives as people.
So I thank you for that, Danielle, so much. And just another remembrance is we went on a blindfold walk, because that was always so empowering to focus and think. And I ended up in front of the wall, and the wall where all the state championships pictures were. And I had them take off their blindfold, and I had them look up at the wall, and I said, look at our picture. And where do you see yourself standing in that picture? Because I believed in manifestation and the power of positive thought so much. And it worked.
Yes,
you have to have the
forget
horse.
that.
You have to have the horses, but it worked.
Yeah, I will never forget that walk. That is for sure. And I do want to highlight something that's full circle, Jody, what you talked about earlier, and even Anne-Marie, what you discussed earlier with, technology and the times have inevitably create change, and the way parents are, interacting with coaches and their athletes, their, daughters, is that everyone wants an expert. Everyone wants to know they're with an expert. But without connection, nobody cares what the expert has to say. And I think the thing about you, Jody, is yes, at the start of your career coaching, you may not have been an expert. You might have had more learning from the athletes than you were being able to give to them. But I have to believe that way back then, you didn't miss the mark on the connection. And therefore, that connection allowed you the doorway and the trust key with all these athletes that they and you can create a collaboration. And that collaboration is what has helped you develop these athletes into not just tremendous runners, throwers, jumpers, but tremendous people. And I think that is the one thing with, even the visualization, the mindfulness, all of the mind work, is that it's new for a lot of people. And so, Jody, you've been practicing this for a long time, but you don't need to come in as the expert and what's the word? Kind of like bulldoze an athlete to say, this is why this works. You need to do this. You've always established connection with your athletes, and that's that trust key. And so I have seen really closed-minded athletes be open to this process because the trust from the coach was there. And that is also something I've also seen is when parents become involved in a way where it is divisive, where, an athlete now feels like they're split between taking the coach's side and the parent's side. What is tumultuous to me that it interrupts is the connection with the coach. And so the trust is gone. And so if we can all, as a running community, athletic community, understand that a coach connection with their athlete is really integral for the trust of having whatever the wisdom or the experience be imparted is about. Like, we're all on the same team here. And I think that's that whole going back to one of your first stories. You're going to build by discussing. You're going to discuss what the athlete's, feeling. You're going to discuss what's their brick walls. You're going to discuss a problem solving strategy. But without the discussion, all we get left is everyone acting like an expert when nobody needs an expert. We need connection first. And so I just want to thank you, Jody, for all of what you've done and shared. And I think, if whoever's listening, athlete or coach, I hope you're able to pull away some nuggets of wisdom through the books, Jody, you've given out as suggestions, the mantra creation, and also just continuing to lean into the coaching process by experimenting, being curious, and by doing. Jody, is there any last points of wisdom or advice you're like itching to just drop for anyone else listening that you haven't already highlighted?
I think that was a great summary, and thank you for kind of putting that net around all my thoughts that I just talked about. But I appreciate that. I have lots, but you know what? Call me up whenever you need me.
Yeah.
I'm here to help, and I love what I do, and I love to empower young athletes.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you for your time in sport, whether it be empowering coaches or empowering athletes. It seems your work is far from done. Continue doing great stuff out in Vegas. And we have no doubt that you will continue to transform lives. So if you've loved this discussion as much as we have, please share this with an athlete you love, a coach you love, a parent you love, so that the wisdom does not fall on deaf ears, so that this does not stop here, that we are in a continuing train of progression, but we do need to pause and reflect with gratitude of where we have all come for women in sport. So needless to say, thank you for being with us. And Jody, thank you for your countless contributions to the world of girls and women in sport. We are forever indebted to you.
For everybody who is tuned in, we hope that you learned something from this episode. We are so excited to make sure we are bringing you accurate and up-to-date information on sports performance, mental performance, nutrition, all things that make you an exceptional girl in sport. Make sure if you love this episode as much as we hope you did, you are sharing with a female athlete or coach you love. Until next time.